Welcome. This is Astrology Insight Now, a weekly forecast program with astrology and other ways to help you make the most of your week and to heighten confidence for daily life. It's run by Pamela Cuccinell, that's me, the astrologer, and I invite you to find out more about my work at insightoasis.com. I look forward to your joining us every week. Please share with your friends, and here we go. July 7th, 2025. Now, I've been talking about this date for a while, and anyone who's interested in astrology has probably seen in various sites about the fact that Uranus enters Gemini on this day, Eastern Time at 3:45 a.m. Now, what that means, again, you can look for the post I did on Spot On Astrology. There's a link on this particular podcast. But basically, we are shifting from the planet of change, revolution, unexpected freedom, moving from Taurus, fixed earth, into Gemini, mutable air. So you don't need to know a lot of astrology at all to just imagine the difference between fixed earth and mutable air. When things are fixed, they're stable. They don't like change that much. So it's been a very challenging transit of the sign Taurus dominating the planet Uranus. And we've seen all kinds of things going on with hurricanes, earth movement, flooding. And as it moves into the sign of Gemini, we will continue to see earth movements because Uranus does have, when it shifts signs or goes retrograde or direct, there's often something that we see in the world that shows, okay, what change is happening and why. And I think one of the things that we'll note with Uranus going into Gemini is that there will be more wind events. So certainly hurricanes, things where wind pulls up and moves across open plains, places that have been deforested, things of that nature. But also what's going on in communications in our world. And we've seen so much change with that already. But I think we'll continue to see as perhaps governments try to enforce what is communicated, also new ways of communication popping up. But on this day, on July 7th, I think it's important for us to think in terms of what do we want to invite in that has to do with change of dialogue, Gemini being one of the signs linked to communication, how we write things, how we articulate things, gossip, what's going on in the neighborhood, how people play the game of telephone. It's a very old-fashioned game, but we see it all the time now where someone says something and then it morphs into something else. It's important, I would think, as the planet moves through the sign of Gemini, for us to better understand verifiable information. But in order to get that hunger, to want that to happen, we're going to have a lot of information that is not verified, which already is happening, of course, but it will magnify. Sort of when you reflect on the journey through Taurus, how so many financial structures have been morphing and changing. And that doesn't mean it's an overnight process and, everything is all wrapped up and magically taken care of. Not at all. But we start to unearth, unravel, reveal things that were problematic or getting to points of no longer being able to be sustained. So Uranus in the sign of Gemini is going to be something that affects certainly anyone who has strong Gemini in their horoscope, like the President of the United States, who is a Gemini. And you may know someone, your moon may be in the sign of Gemini, rising sign. This is the area of life where you're going to see things that might erupt with change. So it's good to notice, okay, where is Gemini in my personal horoscope so that I can see what's ahead with all this potential for new experiences or things that are not quite what I expected to be occurring. And it's not necessarily positive or negative. The energy itself can be very neutral. But what it does is it will present us with situations that we can act on, or depending on the actual situation, we must act on. So that's why it's good to get a sense of what's coming up for you so that you can anticipate what may well be ahead. The thing about Uranus, though, is that it is a surprise. So we can get an idea of what might happen or the potential for, but to absolutely nail it and know it, that's a bit of an art. It can be done to some extent. And so it's good to at least have an idea of what may be ahead for you. So as I speak about that, this day on the 7th may be particularly challenging for some of us because there's a lot of volatility in the ether, especially as we get into the afternoon, early evening. And it's super important to be aware of where you are in space. That means when you're driving or when you're walking around, if you're taking a dance class, be aware of where other people are and what they're doing. Because the more we are kind of working our peripheral vision for what's going on, the less likely we are to find ourselves in some kind of upset. I think what's also really important is to tamp down the temperature. If you are getting angry or you're around someone who's getting angry, you want to lower the level of whatever may be expressed or whatever may be felt. And this passes after early evening. The moon goes void, of course, at 5:29 p.m. And then it's void for the rest of the evening, and it's void all day the next day on the 8th. That's a long void, of course. And as I said last week, and it'll just keep happening again and again, because so many of the planets are in low degrees right now. There's 30 degrees per sign. The moon always travels through its whole 30-degree arc. So as it's approaching the later degrees, depending on what sign it is, we will see these long void of course periods. So what happens when the moon is void of course? Well, one of the things is there's just not the emotional glue for people to follow through with things. So in general, it's a good time to work on things already in motion, to clear things up, to organize, to prepare for the next lunar thrust, which may be easier for you to build momentum and get something off the ground. Since this moon is in the sign of Sagittarius in its void, of course, there's going to be a lot of energy. People, depending on their orientation, fire, air signs especially, are going to be reaching out, doing things, moving around. And all of that can happen. I mean, certainly you want to expend energy in healthy ways and be as productive as possible. Just know that this wouldn't be the ideal time to do that sales pitch for that client you've been trying to meet. It's much better to wait until there's some connection energy with where that moon is traveling, because the moon shows the emotional weather of the day. And if it's kind of meh, well, nothing's going to stick. Even though, again, moon and Sag, there can be a lot of enthusiasm, spontaneity, wanting to chase after an idea, but it generally does not hold. This can be a bit different depending on one's personal horoscope, if that moon is hitting a point in your chart. But overall, that's how we view it, especially anything relationship oriented, as I said, with a client or somebody who's trying to sell, get an idea across, make certain connections. It's just you don't get the charge. What one of the things that is in my head is if you have magnets and the poles aren't in sync, the magnets keep repelling one another. They don't click into that nice little, here we are, this is our happy space. So you want to take action when the moon is actually engaged, making geometric pictures with other planets in the sky. So it doesn't mean it's a non-productive day, it just means it's far better that you focus on things with that you're already engaged with instead of trying to pull off a new idea. Now we're approaching that full moon, which will happen on Thursday. Let me talk about the ninth a little first. The moon enters the sign of Capricorn at 4:55 a.m. And as it moves to the sign of Capricorn, it's in it's making those geometric pictures that I talked about that are things that we want to see as we're working to engage and connect with ideas. This is also approaching that full moon. So this day is a really constructive and productive day, as is Thursday the 10th until basically late afternoon, because what we're doing is we're aiming towards uh, culmination, perhaps, or completion, or a nice momentum or thrust with something that we've been working on. What we can do at this point in time is really bring something down to earth. Now, on Wednesday morning, some of us may encounter a bit of tension, disappointment, something that isn't holding up its end. We may not even understand what or why this is happening. But what's really valuable, if possible, is to move beyond that kind of negative or or it's not coming together feeling, instead of getting mired in it, stuck in it. So it's important to look at it and say, okay, this isn't going exactly as I planned. So and so isn't going to be able to do their part. Someone called in sick. I'm not clear on how this thing is going to happen. And what's really important is to just work with what the original goal or idea is. And so we don't want to get too attached or committed to something that just isn't going to have the legs to go the distance. So some of us may have to disengage, quickly make other plans, or not even necessarily quickly, just figure out a strategy that's going to stay true to the original concept, what you want to make happen. And sometimes it can be a sense of disappointment with the self, where you might think, oh, I thought I'd have this together, or I thought I'd be farther along, or I'd be able to do X, Y, or Z. And you realize I just don't have all the elements to make that happen. Look at what you do have. Give it some time, especially as you get into the later morning. Things can start to fall into place with application. It's not like, boom, it magically happens. But if there is something that you need to make happen, or you want to stay committed, goal oriented to, just give it time to reposition so that you get more clarity on how it may happen in spite of whatever you thought was how it was going to happen. Because oftentimes when we suffer a disappointment or realize we didn't quite have the support we expected or the money we expected, we may think it can't work, whatever it was that we were trying to pull off. Well, sometimes it takes a different spin on what that may have to be in order to still proceed in the way we want. Remember, the moon is in Capricorn. So Capricorn's very practical. It is responsible. And when we're looking at something that we want to pull off, and maybe we don't have everything we need to launch it or make it happen. Sometimes it's a matter of, okay, so this is as far as I can get now, but how can I revisit, position, or get this to a point where it may look very differently in a month from now, 6 months from now, or whatever. So overall, this is a productive day. The biggest bumps may happen until mid-morning. And then the thing that happens in the later afternoon is we just may have a lot of options or things that we want to, directions we might want to explore. So ideally, you tailor back, pull back, and see where you can aim that energy so that you're able to have the productive evening into next day that you're really hoping to have. So the 10th is the full moon in Capricorn. It's at 18 degrees, 50 minutes in the sign of Capricorn. And this is, I think, a full moon that speaks a lot about rewards of application. So, as I was saying, depending on what was going earlier in the week, it may be that you're seeing a lot of things come together over the course of this day that you've been aiming for. It may be that you're at a point where you realized, okay, this is where I can go at this point in time. Doesn't mean you will still be working on it or involved on it over the next couple of weeks and beyond. But the nice thing about when we're at the full moon point, remember the full moon is when the moon is lit by the sun. So in this case, the Capricorn moon is being lit by the Cancer sun. So what I think this is also telling us is take a step back and see where you are. Look at what you've been able to accomplish or bring down to earth, or what the aim or goal is, and really get into knowing how that feels. Are you feeling comfortable with it? Are you feeling as though it's giving you the security you wanted? Are you feeling as though in doing that, whatever the aim is, that you're also feeling a sense of fulfillment or balance in your home life? Because Cancer is a sign linked to home life, family, whether we live alone or there's all sorts of people and animals around. And Capricorn's how we're out in the world, what it is we we achieve or want to achieve. Work. How do we balance those two pieces? And can we aim towards a sense of equilibrium, so that we're feeling as though we are in our work life, we are fed by the grace and ease of being at home. And if we're not, then what perhaps do we correct or adjust, or at least start to aim to adjust as we feel the energy of this full moon? The moon goes void, of course, at 4:37 p.m., so it's void for the evening. Void, of course, moons in the evening, I think, are wonderful times to just kind of chill. Um, Read a book, watch a movie, listen to music, meditate, organize things for the next days that you're doing things. Some people like to iron, so I know you're thinking nobody likes to iron. But there are people who like to iron. I know that. I lived with one once. Fashion people. So there are people who, it's just a sense of, okay, everything is lined up and I'm feeling more peaceful by the order. If order does not make you feel peaceful, then do things that allow you the sense of, I am working on giving myself some sort of relaxation, recharging time. Capricorn wants to have the energy necessary to continue that haul up the mountain. Think about the goat, sure-footed going up that mountain. Where are we? So the morning of the 11th, the moon is void, of course, and then it enters the sign of Aquarius at 1:21 p.m. And it's in the sign of Aquarius until it goes void, of course, at 3:45 p.m. on Saturday the 12th. So again, you'll have the mid-afternoon into evening void of course, and actually most of the day on Sunday the 13th is void of course. So I'm going to talk a little more concretely about the weekend. So basically what I'm looking at is, I would say, maximize productivity on Friday the 11th. And in order to do that, it's super important that you double check communications. Mercury will go retrograde next week on the 18th. So we're in this point of time where it behooves us to kind of prepare ourselves for that period by double checking things, realizing certain things we're going to go over, edit, readdress, consider differently. So it's valuable, especially on the 11th, which looks like it can be a very connective day for networking, talking to people, making alliances, writing, communications, internet, all that stuff is very, very jazzed on the 11th. And it's super valuable to simply know that as you're booking through all this kind of fast moving energy, especially air and fire signs that just love to have that kind of ping pong ideas and a lot of thoughts racing around, is that you want to make sure the messages are clear. So anything contractual, anything that requires appointments, following up, super, super important to put these things in place on Friday the 11th and into Saturday the 12th. Saturday the 12th, the moon goes void, of course, at 3:45 p.m. And the other thing that's going on this weekend, depending on where you live, is Saturn goes retrograde. The exact time for Eastern time zone is 12:07 a.m. on Sunday the 13th. And what this means when Saturn goes retrograde is that the planet that symbolizes discipline, structure, showing up, organization, fear, because nothing limits us as much as fear, appears to be moving backwards from our perspective. So when that happens, depending on if you have Saturn retrograde or direct in your horoscope, because that can make a bit of a difference in impact, but also where Saturn is traveling in your horoscope. But in general, one thing it means is that there can be delays in things that we want to concretize. Doesn't mean there are, and it doesn't mean everything, but it does mean that as much as we can prepare and put in place before that retrograde action is good to do. Once it goes retrograde, there can be delays in basically getting things to move, that you rely on authority or institutions or people showing up. So we're basically hitting that point. And the thing to be aware of is this particular weekend, we may see a harbinger of that, something that just seems to be harder to move, more resistant to going forward or having the thing take shape and form. We're in the waning moon cycle, and this weekend in general, with that void of course moon from mid-afternoon on Saturday through 7:45 p.m. on Sunday is basically showing a lot of ideas are going out, a lot of thought, a lot of connections, possibilities, potential, but without the moon entering a geometric picture with another planet and with the Saturn going retrograde, we can get a sensation that things just are not coming together in the way we would like. The good news is that at 7:45 p.m., the moon enters the sign of Pisces. And what I would anticipate is possible is that if there was a lot of, so-and-so said they do this, but it's not quite coming together. And how about this thought or that thought or blah, 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 is that as of that evening, when the moon enters Pisces, we could hear of something. Something comes in, unexpected, didn't anticipate that as a possibility, and it may upset other plans, or it may be something that we can modify, adjust to, and basically, as the phrase goes, change horses in midstream. So, as I said, nothing, when I was talking about Uranus before, and this is a Uranus picture, it's not necessarily bad or good, but it is about something coming up that we can take action on or not, or in some cases we must. But the overall outcome, especially if we're responding in ways that are moving with whatever the energy is, the overall outcome is auspicious.
You have been listening to Astrology Insight Now. Please share with your friends, and if you'd like to make a donation, you can do so at astrologyinsightnow.com. Have a stellar week, and we hope to see you next time.